might go beyond when they're talking about super intelligence, which probably might be autonomous in its thinkings. But those, I think, some technology experts here who are on the panel might say that that's the artificial general intelligence that we are all aiming for is perhaps might still be a dream, but it's quite scary if it happens. So unemployment rate in Pakistan is double the employment rate. And agriculture sector, wholesale retail industry and manufacture industry were the one biggest hit. With the adoption in AI, there are going to be three main disruptions as we foresee in Pakistan. Informal sector is going to take a heavy hit, and those informal, though they don't come in the security net, social net of the economy. Those are menial workers, those are largely women, so that's going to create another inequality, which is a concern with AI. And of course, then manual laborers who do contractual daily work and so on. And then there's also the good news or the bad news. I don't know how you see it. AI is going to impact the highly educated and the highly skilled more than the other classes. And so what it does, it is a possibility that it will increase to the divide even more. Only 9% of a population goes through higher education. So you can well imagine what that means for Pakistan. If it's only the 9% that get the advantage, how are we planning? And I am hoping our panelists will give some answers to that. And so these are some of the figures we took from the Pakistani economic survey. But there's a bright side too, and the thing that with use of AI, they'll be able to increase the sectors that have actually been declining for now. Let's hope, keep on hoping, like Dr. Trimble said, that hope and hard work, and that's the way to go. And so for us, again, is it a reality? Because on the AI government readiness index that was developed in UK, Pakistan stands far behind on the 92nd scale. And I think, unfortunately, China and India are way, way ahead, 17th and 32nd, respectively. So that's a food for thought for all of us who are sitting in this room. Possibilities are endless. Let's not think that this is all lost, because 50% population that is illiterate can be drastically helped with AI if we make the right use. So there are trends which are troubling. And again, I said, it's how you frame the narrative. It's positive or negative, and that's how we move. I then invite, Rabia. Rabia, let me tell you how honored we are to have you as a moderator. Rabia Akhtar is the founding director of the Center of Security, Strategy, Policy Research, and the School of Integrated Social Sciences. Was there nothing left? At the University of Lahore, where she is also the Dean of Faculty of Social Sciences. There you go. She's a visiting fellow for this academic year at the Project for Managing the Atom Belfer Center, Harvard Kennedy School. Wow. And she's also, she was a Fulbright Scholar for PhD in Security Studies from Kansas. And she is a visiting faculty member at NATO Defense College Rome and the Nuclear Boot Camp Rome. And I do not know what this long term is in something in Italy, and I'll pass it over. So from 2018 to 2022, she served as the Foreign Affairs Council, Imran Khan's Advisory Council on Foreign Affairs, and she's a non-resident senior fellow at the South Asia Center, Atlantic Council of Washington, D.C., and British American Security Information Counselor. So I hope this is all.
This is
good. So we are very honored to have. And the only woman on the stage. That we are very happy to have you. So over to you, Ravi.
Thank you so much for your such generous and kind introduction, Professor Dr. Rukhsana Zia. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to congratulate you, Dr. Rukhsana and Dr. Mahwish Raza, and your team at the Center for Learning and Teaching at FCCU for hosting such a brilliant panel discussion. Dr. Edelton, you must be so proud because the Department of Education at FCCU is one of the best in our country. And I, as an academic, am in awe of the phenomenal work that is being done at CLT under the dynamic leadership of these two leading ladies. A huge round of applause for them and the entire faculty at FCCU. The panel discussion today on AI and the future of work is an extremely important one and thought-provoking in many ways. It aims to stimulate your thinking on critical questions related to AI, and we have an all-star cast panel for you today. We have Dr. Fawad Khan. I think he'll be joining us online. I would be introducing all the speakers and then proceeding by requesting them to make 7 to 10 minutes opening remarks. And once that session for remarks is over, we will open the floor for Q&A. So please do collect your thoughts along the way. Dr. Fawad Khan currently serves as the Chief Commercial Officer at Concave Agri, leading commercial strategy and digital tool development firm in agri-tech. Formerly as Chief Partnerships and Strategy Officer as Bakhabar Kisan, he enhanced agricultural capabilities with AI and satellite imagery. He has also driven significant IT projects at Bharat Telecom and PTCL and led data center innovations at Terra Spring Private Limited. Additionally, he was instrumental in founding the Ghulam Isaq Institute for Engineering, Science and Technology and was Principal Research Officer at National Institute of Electronics, Islamabad. Dr. Fawad holds a PhD and MSc in Computer Information and Control Engineering from University of Michigan and ASP in Electrical Engineering from MIT. Please, a huge round of applause for Dr. Fawad. Our next speaker is Mr. Shahzeb Sabel. Shahzeb is a seasoned management consultant specializing in institutional transformation and performance improvement with a tech MBA from Hult International Business School and dual chartered accountant designations. He brings his strategic financial acumen to complex challenges. He's currently serving as the senior director at EY, an international consulting firm, and is also visiting faculty member at LUMS. Welcome, Shahzeb, to the panel. Our next speaker is Dr. Haider Abbas, who is presently serving as Director General of Pakistan's National Cyber Emergency Response Team, CERT, with a PhD in Information Security from KTH Sweden and certifications from MIT, IBM, and EC Council. He's a globally recognized cybersecurity expert. Additionally, Dr. Abbas holds the distinction of being the founder and director of National Cybersecurity Auditing and Evaluation Lab at NUST, and his remarkable contributions have earned him numerous accolades at the national and international level. Thank you so much for being here with us, Dr. Haider Abbas. Our next speaker is Mr. Ahmed Bilal Sufi. He's a renowned dispute resolution lawyer with over 30 years of experience. He's the founding president of the Research Society of International Law and senior partner of the well-reputed law firm ABS & Co. with offices in Lahore and Islamabad. He served as the Federal Minister for Law and Justice, Parliamentary Affairs and Human Rights in the caretaker government in 2013. Mr. Sufi often represents Pakistan as an expert in international law matters, providing legal counsel with International Court of Justice, International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes, and International Chamber of Commerce, and has been internationally ranked consistently as one of the leading individuals in dispute resolution. Welcome to the panel, Mr. Sufi. And our final speaker is Dr. Sohail Naqvi. He is the CEO of Knowledge Streams, a venture focused on equipping youth with the skills to succeed in the IT sector. Previously, he served as rector of the University of Central Asia for 4 years and was the 4th Vice Chancellor of LUMS. Prior to this, he was the Executive Director of the Higher Education Commission for 8 years, where he oversaw implementation of an ambitious portfolio of programs. He was awarded the order, and please pardon my French, the Order of Palmes Academiques with the rank of Chevalier by the French government and Sitara Imtiaz by the government of Pakistan for his services in higher education. Dr. Naqvi earned his bachelor's, master's, and PhD in electrical engineering from Purdue University. Welcome to the panel, Dr. Naqvi. With this, we would like to open our session with Dr. Fawad Khan. Has he joined us on Zoom? All right.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. Dr. Fawad, I would like you to give your opening remarks for 7 to 10 minutes. And just for the audience, I would like to scope the questions that we would like you to address. What specific skill sets are most critical for Pakistani workforce to acquire through reskilling or upskilling programs to adopt to the evolving job market? We would also like you to talk about, with AI automating menial labor, how will this impact low-skilled workers in Pakistan, especially considering the widespread computer illiteracy, the specifics of agriculture, since you look at that sector, and the impact on customer care and the service industry. Over to you, Dr. Khan.
Okay, thank you. The scenario is a little depressing for Pakistan, and I'll explain why. And we are singularly unprepared for what is going to hit us. Pakistan is currently working on an AI strategy paper, which is on the website of the Ministry of Information Technology for comments. The AI strategy in India, Kenya, Tunisia, EU, it was all finalized, or at least the first version of it was finalized way back in 2018. In other countries such as Canada, Singapore, UAE, China, Japan, the first version came out in 2017. Now, I was reading recently about, you all must have heard of ChatGPT. In India, 45% of the consumers use ChatGPT. In Morocco, the number is 38%. In UAE, it's 34%. In Thailand, it is something like 14%. And Pakistan doesn't even figure on that survey. These are numbers shared by the Boston Consulting Group. Many years ago, this is, I think, in the mid-90s, I was invited to give a talk on, the state of computers and computer industry in Pakistan. And one of the things at which the organizers, which was USAID and some other folks, became really unhappy, was that I said that Pakistan had already missed the boat. And we are and there is actually evidence to support that. We all talk about the IT industry being the panacea for Pakistan's foreign exchange problems. But if you look at Pakistan's IT exports on a per capita basis, it's about $10 per capita per year, right? In a country like Sri Lanka, which does not boast of IT being the panacea for their economic ills, the corresponding number is $55 per capita. And that is the education dividend. So the problem really in Pakistan is that we pay lip service to education, and so the sort of skills that are required to take advantage of what AI has to offer and to develop AI systems, they cut across, they're interdisciplinary, cut across different subjects. So, there's some obvious ones and there's some not so obvious ones. And, while electrical engineering, computer science, mathematics, statistics, mechanical engineering, they're the sort of the obvious ones, but economics, linguistics, law, philosophy, neuroscience and biology, they are also very, very relevant. And one may ask, why law? There is, and in the opening remarks, it was, Dr. Roxana, she mentioned data issues. So there has to be legislation which has to be developed around AI. There are going to be regulatory issues. There are going to be ethical issues. There's a recent policy statement by the South African government on ethics in AI, which is, part of their AI policy. And they talk about anti-competitive behavior, risk associated with robotic or autonomous devices that use AI to make decisions. And this is very important. This goes to the question of liability. So if there is an autonomous vehicle involved in an accident, who is liable? Or if medical diagnosis is made by an AI system and it turns out to be false, who is liable? Is it the writer, the developer of the software, the company, the hospital, the attending physician? These are all questions to which we do not have answers, and the sort of legal framework, even in advanced economies, is being developed. So there is a whole slew of subjects that need to be brought into the framework for us to take advantage of what AI has to offer. We also have to make a choice. Are we going to be users of AI, or are we going to be creators of AI systems? And, we are users of, computers. We do use Word, we use PowerPoint, we use Zoom, without really understanding how these systems work. We could become just users of AI, which will not require too many skills. But if we want to become creators of AI, then we really need skilling and education in subjects which I mentioned. Coming to agriculture and related areas. This is one area where Pakistan can make tremendous strides and can leapfrog. And one of the things that keeps me very excited and passionate about agriculture is because surprisingly it is the one area which is the confluence of brings together a lot of the new technologies. So, how is AI currently being used in agriculture? So, monitoring of plant disease and pests. So, you take photographs of plants. You have an AI system that can tell you with a very high degree of accuracy what, if any, disease exists and what remedial measures need to be applied. And there is a company called Plantix. They have this system available. You can download the app and use it. A lot of progressive farmers in Pakistan are already using it. Crop and health monitoring of the soil. So this can be done using satellite imagery as well as drone imagery, and basically you can estimate with a very high degree of accuracy if there are certain nutrients which are missing, or if there isn't sufficient water in the field, and take appropriate measures. And the appropriate measures are what are called variable rate spraying or variable rate application of whether it's fertilizer, other nutrients, or irrigation. One of the things which AI really helps in is detecting when a produce is ready for harvesting. So, you don't want to harvest early and you don't want to harvest late. So you want to harvest just at the right time. Right now, the practice is to just, it's a look and feel. It looks good, feels good, harvest it. But that may not be the optimum time for harvesting. Another important area where AI is being used is estimating yields, and which is very important. Every year, every other year, we have a crisis whether we need to import wheat or not import wheat. If we knew ahead of time there's going to be a shortage, maybe wheat imports could be done at an earlier stage. And incur. Yeah.
May I ask you to please wrap up? Your 10 minutes are up.
Yeah, sure.
A long time.
Sure. So, last thing, I just wanted to mention climate. The climate is a very important part of agriculture, and one of the things is accurate weather forecasting. And we have now Google, Microsoft, NVIDIA, and other companies that are using AI models to make weather forecasts which are of unprecedented accuracy. And so NVIDIA recently, they introduced a model called FOUR FAST, which makes weather predictions at a cost which is 200 times less and which uses 300 times less energy than the computational models that are used. So the impact of AI is going to be huge. We are singularly unprepared for it right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. A huge round of applause for Dr. Fawad, please. Thank you so much for keeping it real. Pakistan needs to understand, and I think many universities and private sector also understand that we don't provide this required skill set for Pakistanis, in line with the evolving job market. But we have our other panelists who will be talking about that. Tushar Zeb, let me come to you and talk about real-world AI use cases. What businesses do you think will be most affected by AI? And in your role as a consultant in different organizations, what are the most frequent concerns that organizations have since the advent of AI in 2020? Please also do talk about specific solutions. Do you offer for restructuring organizational structure, governance, human skill set, job descriptions in the world of AI? You have had experiences with clients, so if you care to share some of those with us as well. Please keep your remarks to 7 to 10 minutes.
Let me
Thank you.
put the timer so I may remain within the time. That's important. Yeah. Thank you, and thank you so much for the invitation. And this is indeed a very interesting topic to talk, very close to my heart. So, starting from, as Ma'am Rusana mentioned in her opening remarks about the fifth industrial revolution. So, I'll start my discussion with a question to all of you. Like, there were three first industrial revolutions which were very revolutionized. It changed how we used to live, we used to operate with the industrial revolution. First was the steam, second was electricity, and third was the computer. But it is said that the fourth is the most, and the fifth, adding AI to that, is the most disruptive one as compared to all three first. We've seen a tremendous change. Why you think that fourth industrial revolution was the most disruptive as compared to first three, where we have so much industrialization was there, and still it is said that fourth or fifth is the most disruptive and last two as compared to first three. So any ideas on that? First of all, we need to understand one thing, that all the three first industrial revolutions was about to automate the human efforts. Still, the power to make decision was being lied with the human at that time. So, with the technology evolution, we used to have so much data available with us that by analyzing that vast amount of data, we can identify trends, we can identify patterns, and based on those trends and patterns, we can predict how it needs to be and we can take a decision. So that's the fundamental change which needs to be understood, number one. Previously, I can still recall, I'm not very old, but I can still recall there was a time when I used to go and used to buy a card for like 2,000 rupees for like 256 MB, and now we can like buy a very huge data hard drives for the similar amount. Now with the technology evolution, now the data can be stored, that can be analyzed, that can be available. So with the analytics used to be there from the ancient time. Being accountant, I can vouch for that. We used to apply analytics during the audits since the start. But with the availability of the large sets of data, the analytics techniques got advanced, and now our analytics not only restricted to the descriptive, but also prescriptive sort of analysis as well. Now we can diagnose what was the problem that used to be. Now why it happened, when it's going to happen, and what need to get done to avoid the future. That is how future look like. So coming from my experience, so to be very honest, AI is not you can say a buzzword or trend. It's really a transformative force, which we need to capitalize. And as Dr. Saab earlier mentioned, I've been part of many, I've extensively worked with the UN and many international development partners and do extensive studies across Pakistan and the region. So in one of the studies which I conducted 2 years back, so in the Pakistan, the access to the mobiles which the population had is more than 80%, and to the internet users are more than 50%. But the irony is there is only a one-way communication. This is the only source of infotainment. They are consuming the data, and there are only less than 5% who can actually speak to the machines. So once you cannot ask a question to the machine, that cannot benefit you. So how to change that? That's your part. You are the curriculum expert. You need to do. But those are the facts from the studies which we conducted. So the problem is when we can't speak to the machine, we can't have an idea. We are having this discussion in this environment. We are talking about in the language, but mostly the people they can't even understand the apps. Iran is just near to us. They have their own app store in their own language, and that is one of the biggest app stores. So they can communicate. The audience can actually communicate what they're talking to. So coming from my experience, since we are like international firms, we work with. So my experience is different. So the rest of the panel can cover the other spectrum of the population. We mostly work with the large organizations across Pakistan and the MENA as well. So they are very exciting use cases which I'm going to discuss today. So having said that, which are sectors are going to affect most? Any sector where the data is available in the vast amount, and you can analyze the data, you can use the AI there. Where there are many repetitive tasks are there, you can use there. So coming from the use cases, there are very exciting use cases. Recently we are working, so Being a consultant, I can share the name of some clients which RFPs have been publicly disclosed. So there are different confidentiality level, 1, 2, 3. So I will disclose accordingly. So maybe somewhere I cannot disclose the client name, somewhere I can, depending upon the protocols. So one of the client, Karachi-based, so this is public RFP, Karachi Electric, we are in discussion with them. So very excellent use case. So they have a very huge amount of their asset maintenance of the transformers and operation failures. So they have a huge amount of data available with us. So right now we're in discussion with them and closing a project where they can, analyzing the past performance of the performance and the energy consumption, they can easily predict the operation failures, and they can easily predict the predictive maintenance to save a lot of amount of cost of there. So this is one of the use cases we are working the KE, and likewise KE Solar they have introduced, and to me the problem is that even other solar companies have a huge market share than the KE itself. So we told them, and we developed this case, and we went to them and asked them, you have all the data, you have all the information about their spending patterns, their consumption. By applying that data, you can easily predict which are customers going to churn the most, and you can like design a strategy around that. Likewise, with one of the financial bank, there is as we all know, HBL is giving a very huge discounts. So once another bank, I cannot disclose the name, and they were losing many customers of their credit customers from their operations. So we told them that you have all the data, you have all the consumer patterns, consumption patterns available with you. Why don't you apply the AI and identify which customers are going to lose in the near future, and you can easily make your strategies accordingly, and you can make sure that you don't lose those customers. So these are sort of projects we are actually going. One of the projects we did 2 years back with one of the largest textile. So that in the procurement supply chain, they embedded the AI at the time of procurement. They can analyze the procurement rates from different sources, applying the different knowledge sets, and they help them a lot for the responsible buying and making sure they are dealing with the right supplier at the right time. So there are many use cases over there, but the important thing is, first of all, there are many concerns around that the AI is coming, which need to discuss as well. So having said that, number one, there are technological concerns on the technical side, that how the data is going to make available, because if data is not there, you cannot apply the accuracy of that model. So to train the AI model, you need to have the data accurate. So there are a lot of activities are getting done, how to accumulate the data, to make sure the data is right, that the data is governed properly with proper controls. So that's one of the activity. And then there is a psychological and change and ethical imperatives as well, which are the concerns of the organization, which you need to understand. So for any change, by nature, by the design, the way we are as a human, there is a fright and freeze mind psychology we works. So first of all, if it's any change, we think as a negative. It's very important for all the leaders, for all the organizations. And as a consultant, what we do, when we go to any department, we told them that it is for your use and your help, not to challenge whatever you've done in the past. So likewise, if the procurement department is doing any procurement, so with my AI model is not going to challenge your past practices, rather it is going to benefit in the future as well. So that is how you communicate the message. That is very important at the end of the day, because at the end of the day, AI is going to complement the human knowledge, not to challenge that. So that's the confidence is very important in the psychological, and that the concern is very important. So as we have seen, all the companies are going through technology disruptions. The way they have managed the psychological part very well during all those digital disruptions, their chances of success get increased many times as compared to the organization which are only focused on the technical component. And the last concern, which is very important, is the ethical imperative. I think that is very important. As Iqbal said, कि है दिल के लिए मौत मशीनों की हुकूमत, एहसास मुरव्वत को कुचल देते हैं आदाब. So if you are not concerned with the ethical imperatives, otherwise this is going to destroy our social fabric of the society at all. So it's very important to have social ethical governance frameworks into the play as the technology is evolving. That is very important. In terms of ethical imperatives, could be in terms of cybersecurity, which is going to discuss in a while, in terms of legal frameworks, which is Sir is going to discuss in a while. So we need to make sure as the technology evolves, all the fabrics and all the components of this ecosystem need to be in the right place. So that's very important. In terms of how we do all the changes from our organizations. So first of all, for any change, we need to involve the client right from the start. So very important thing is like honest communication, which is very important. To demystify the AI and their concerns, we need to be honest, first of all. We have to have this realization where do we stand at the moment. So knowing your weakness, I think that is one of the biggest strengths. So first of all, we need to understand where do we stand at the moment, what is coming into the play. And most important thing is we should not use AI as a tool or some challenge. We need to think that how we can use it as a strategic enabler, so that they can support us innovation and growth. So that's very important. So in order to familiarize with the tool and to support us, so our mindset need to get changed. So as a whole, going further, my last comment is we need to understand from since I've been part of the consulting firm. So for me, very important is the knowledge which is coming into the firm. So that is very important. And for that, I think there is a huge role of the society to get to play. Understand what are the future needs of evolving needs of the workforce, which is need to get understood, and those need to get embedded. Not only the knowledge, but also the skill set, the mindset which the student should have inculcated into their approach, which need to be there. And for that, I think today's discussion is going to be very useful. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Shadab, for giving us a practitioner's perspective from the field, and thank you for keeping time. We will now move to Dr. Haider Abbas. Dr. Abbas, you have the distinction of being the founder of the National Cybersecurity Auditing and Evaluation Lab. So we would like you to talk to us about our Pakistan's National Cybersecurity Framework. There is this Cybersecurity Governance Toolkit by EDU CAUSE, which outlines 5 levels of cybersecurity maturity rating, with 0 being no maturity, no governance infrastructure, and the topmost level being governance thoroughly integrated with businesses and other operational processes. So please do talk about where does Pakistan fall on that spectrum. We would also like you to comment about, disinformation, spread of fake news, fake videos, and as to how can the public be equipped to discern reality from fake information. So over to you.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
I will be keeping, I'll start this and this will buzz in 10 minutes.
Please.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much. So let me start by explaining the whole cybersecurity paradigm of Pakistan and the world, starting from this hall. So as an individual, everyone sitting here in this room, having this tiny gadget in his hand, having all its digital assets that is stored into your mobile phone. Your photos, your videos, your audios, your bank accounts, your tokens and everything is stored on your mobile phone, right? Now, one level up, come to your organization. Here at FC College, you can see that all your assets have digitally moved, partially or fully moved with the digitization. In this room, I can see many cameras, I can see many sensors, I can see the Wi-Fi and all the stuff. These are all being connected to provide you a smart environment so you can perform your work efficiently. Now come at the country level, all these organizations that have this kind of infrastructure that we call the cyber world, the country's digital assets, or you can say the critical infrastructure of a country is also being dependent on the cyber world, right? You have the smart electricity, you have the smart homes, you have the smart cities, your city is being surveillanced by the smart city environment and all the stuff. So smart means being connected, having so many sensors surrounded by you, right? You're surrounded by many of the sensors. So the cyber security, the issues, any of the device that you're carrying into your hand could be a malfunctioning device that can intercept, that can inject, that can download intentionally or unintentionally the malware onto your mobile phone. It can connect with your Wi-Fi to your organization. It could be propagated to your organization. It can sabotage all the system that you have that we call the malware, that we call the spyware, the IDV, all the you can say the problems that the cybersecurity has. Similarly comes to the national level. So These devices that you have, when you, ma'am is talking to Sir Jonathan, and you think that these both are talking and these both are listening? No, this is not the case, right? So we as a nation, let's understand the whole paradigm. We as a nation, we do not develop these mobile phones. We do not have the software that is embedded into this. We do not have the protocols that actually communicate whole the mechanism. Even we just, on the top of that, we put a security layer that we call a very thin layer of security, or the end line of security that we have. So the issue is, when we procure these devices from different vendors, these might have the backdoors intentionally embedded into this, or maybe some kind of unintentional kind of flaws that could be left within your devices and all the infrastructure that you have. So if I have the skill set, I can actually connect with your mobile phone, any of the device that you have. This video that is being relayed on Zoom, you think that these guys are only listening and watching me? No, this is open to everyone, all of the world, who has the expertise, who can connect, bypass the security system, and see what Dr. Haider Abbas is saying currently at FCU, right? What is being, now all of your devices is listening what is going on in this hall, right? And this can send, and this is definitely sending data. So some of the organization that they required, and they have the control of all the devices. So you are heavily surrounded by these kind of mechanisms, your organizations and your country, where the technology, you are the technology consumer, you are not the technology producer. All the servers, the technology providers have the big giants that have the different purposes to use your data. You might have heard about the surveillance capitalism, right? Your Google, your Meta, they are all selling your data to different companies, right? And there could be some other organizations that can extract your data, what is going on to this. On the other hand, after land, sea, and space, the cyber has been declared as the 5th domain of war, right? So which compared to the traditional war, there is a start time and there is an end time. For the cyber war, every country is always in the war state. Every organization is spectacle to the threats, to the cyber attacks that they can actually sabotage their systems. So this data is the new oil actually, right? That the industry is being governed, the national economies, the country's economy, the directions, the people and the organization is being governed through this data. And it is very important that how we keep this data, how we secure this data, and how we process this data. Using the social media stuff and the use of AI actually has made so much progress in the sense that adversarial AI, the weaponization of AI, is actually helping the bad guys to hide their footprints when they do some kind of cyber attacks. They can launch novel attacks, novel mechanisms that can bypass your firewalls, that can bypass your antivirus systems. These are called the 0 days or advanced persistent threat that could be injected to your mobile phone or your devices. And it can roam around and work as my soldier in someone else's army waiting for my command as a bot when this has been granted, and it will launch an attack to some of the organization, even some of the countries. So this is the whole scenario of the world. So individual level, the organizational level, and national level, internationally, this is the challenge for all the organizations. So some of the organizations that has the control of these technologies, the big giants are actually governing this whole paradigm of cyber world, the cyberspace. AI, if you see that there are many mechanisms available in terms of security, that how you can protect your data, how you can limit your access to the data. How many of you have ever seen the WhatsApp cybersecurity policies or the security setting? Anyone did this setting ever in life? No, you have not seen. Have anyone read the disclaimer that, or the you can say the pop-up screen that comes to you that accept or reject, right? Have you ever read that? They have actually got your consent to use your data for different purposes. They have already taken this. When they have taken this, so there is some kind of legal use, or you can say for the business purposes, something like this, but the user does not have the control to the data unless you have your servers within your countries and you do some kind of data centers, the cloud environment and all the stuff. So you store your file in your home computer in a Google Drive and you access here and I send it to you through WhatsApp, where it is stored, where it is being sent. Who is the owner of that file currently? Whatever you put on the social media, who is the owner of that specific photo or specific video that you have uploaded, right? So the deep fake during this COVID-19 era, we and every nation actually generated gold mines in terms of text, graphs and videos. I'm talking, my all gestures are being recorded, right? Everything is being done. So everything could be replicated, as my colleague has mentioned, through the deep fakes, right? I'm talking and he's talking. For example, his gesture is being relayed, I am talking on behind of that, right? So there should be a national level initiative or maybe some kind of, because the platforms, the you can say the Meta and all the other platforms of these social media apps, they are not providing some kind of strict content regulation and these kind of. So I mean, you have to do your effort to see if you receive some message, if it is a misinformation or if it is the correct information, right? There are some kind of mechanism available to backtrack, to actually see what is going on, to actually see if the video is being tampered, if the voice is being tampered. So how many of is there a network administrator here of the FC college here? How many of your devices here in this college have the licensed Windows? All. That's great. So these are the very few organizations in Pakistan who has the licensed software, right? Most of the organizations, when we did the gap analysis, around 75% organizations or 80% organizations in Pakistan, they're using the pirated software. The pirated software means serving malware, right? This can be easily exploited and everyone has the keys and the backdoors available to them that they could be exploited. Then there are different efforts of various organizations in Pakistan doing very good in Pakistan, for example, the NADRA, the PTA, the many of the good organizations in Pakistan, but they are working in silos, right? They're not sharing their information and these kind of things. So, okay. So these are the things that as a national level, when we did the gap analysis, we found out these of the challenges in Pakistan. And we actually launched various programs through the initiative that I am heading, that involves the Cyber Patriot program, Cyber Campus program, the research for the Pakistan in the area of cybersecurity, where we employ the postdoc students, the master students, the PhD students to do research what is required from the organizations in Pakistan. So this is how that even the FC, I will invite them to be part of this Cyber Campus initiative that will actually take on board all the big giants of technology organizations, the top universities and the government organizations, and to come up with some kind of initiative that the compliance of cybersecurity could be done effectively and the auditing in the organizations could be done effectively. So this is I'll be open for any of the questions.
Thank you so much. I hope you guys are scared enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know how many of you use Cam Scanner as an app. Yeah, so to the absolute horror, I found out just last night, it's a beautiful app, right? Perfect, works perfectly. But as part of their functionality, they need to submit all the data to mainland China, irrespective of what you're scanning. And I was in conversation with a young bureaucrat yesterday during a session when this was revealed, and he had just scanned 21 pages of an official document to be sent to his superior. And so we don't know when we sign, and you rightly said, we just scroll down, agree, and we want to move on with our lives. We don't care where our data ends up. So please delete that app.
From one final comment.
Find another one.
If you think in this perspective, I did not mention any of the app, then you have to delete all the apps.
Go off the grid. Yeah, go off the grid, go to Mongolia. All right, this leads us to ethical and legal implications for which we have Mr. Ahmed Bilal Sufi. There are international conventions that look at AI, but there aren't any legal frameworks in the world that have been adopted yet to regulate use of AI, deployment and development of AI. So please do enlighten us whether Pakistan, where does Pakistan fit in that legality spectrum? Then there are ethical issues related with AI. With respect to human rights, digital rights are also an extension of human rights. So please do speak to us about the ethical implications of AI and its use. Over to you, sir.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, Dr. Rabia, members of the panel, बहुत सारे teachers, ख़वातीन और हज़रात, अस्सलाम वालेकुम. It's an honor to be before so many teachers. आप लोग सारे इतना ज़बरदस्त काम कर रहे हैं, and I really admire that if you are here in this hall, then you have won the place in the faculty on account of your expertise, performance, and ability to pass on good knowledge to students. So a round of applause for yourselves. I'm humbled to be here, as I said. आपको मैंने क्या बताना आपसे, आपकी क्वेरी से शायद हम सीख के जाएंगे. एक कॉन्सेप्ट है ग्लोबल कॉमन्स का, which basically means certain areas are common and transnational. Environment is part of global commons. Seas, water is part of global commons. Now there are international conventions that regulate some of these global commons. We have Law of the Sea Convention 1982, which comprehensively regulates the waters, the fish stocks and everything, things which are common to various states. इसी तरह environment के ऊपर, climate के ऊपर we had Climate Paris Treaty. लेकिन जो आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस है जो अब आ रही है, उस पर कोई कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव इंटरनेशनल ट्रीटी नहीं है, और उसकी वजह बहुत सी हो सकती हैं, लेकिन जिनेवा में इस पर नेगोशिएशंस जारी हैं और कोशिश की जा रही है कि डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज पुश बैक करें डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज को, जिनके हाथ में टेक्नोलॉजी है, कि वो कुछ लीगल फ्रेमवर्क्स पे मान जाएं और एआई को और ऑटोमेटेड रोबोटिक वेपन्स को रेगुलेट करने का लीगल फ्रेमवर्क पे कंसीड कर दें. दे आर नॉट. सो चाइना, यूएस, रशिया, इंडिया रिलक्टेंट जोन में हैं. जो डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज हैं जो असेस कर रही हैं कि दे आर बिहाइंड टेक्नोलॉजी, दे आर पुशिंग फॉर इट. सो आर्म्स ट्रेड ट्रीटी के नीचे एक कमेटी ऑफ एक्सपर्ट्स काम कर रही है. पाकिस्तान मिशन is in Geneva is trying to lead negotiations. We are helping some of the mission members to find legal arguments to build, और वो argument जो है उसका ethical legal structure है, legal architecture है कि क्या होगा, who will be responsible for a certain event if it happens in the world. कौन responsible होगा? वो मुल्क जो उस AI को यूज कर रहा है, वो शख्स, वो कंपनी, वो पेटेंट, वो मैन्युफैक्चरर, वो यूजर, वो प्रोग्रामर. सो देयर सो मेनी एक्टर्स. सो इट्स ग्रेट डिफिकल्टी टू फिगर आउट कि आपने रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी किससे एट्रीब्यूट करनी है. सो एट्रीब्यूटिंग रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी under local law and under international law is becoming a serious legal challenge. Now where does this challenge go? We don't know. लेकिन एक और जो important point है, वो जिस तरह किसी ने बात की, जो critical infrastructure है, इंटरनेशनल लीगल फ्रेमवर्क में कुछ चीज़ें आइडेंटिफाई हो गई हैं कि हर मुल्क का कुछ क्रिटिकल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर होता है जिसको डेजिग्नेट किया जाता है। लेट्स से आपके डैम्स और आपका पानी जो है वो कंप्यूटर सिस्टम से कंट्रोल हो रहा है, आपका बैंकिंग निज़ाम इज बीइंग रेगुलेटेड बाय डिफरेंट सॉफ्टवेयर्स। सो कुछ चीज़ें डिक्लेयर की जाएंगी, नोटिफाई की जाएंगी कि दिस इज क्रिटिकल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर। इफ समवन वांट्स टू हैक इनटू इट, that will be a very serious offense against under a domestic law. And if behind it individual is a state, then it raises the level. Then it is viewed as an armed attack or an attack under the UN Charter, because अब तो use of weapons पहले होता था ना कि मिसाइल्स और जीप्स जा रही हैं और बटालियन मूव कर रही है, तो आप कहते थे आर्म्ड अटैक अकर कर रहा है। ये पूरे फ्रेजेस हैं UN चार्टर के आर्टिकल 51 के फ्रेमवर्क में। तो अब वो कहते हैं कि अगर ये पता लग जाए कि ईरान का जो न्यूक्लियर प्रोग्राम है उसके इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर पर जो अटैक करने वाला हैकर है उसके पीछे एक रियासत है, तो देन दिस टेंट अमाउंट्स टू अटैक। सो देयरफॉर इट बिकम्स अ सीरियस नाइटमेयर फ्रॉम द मैनेजमेंट ऑफ द स्टेट पर्सपेक्टिव के जो इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर जो हैकर इंडिया में दिल्ली में बैठा है कहीं और बैठा है वो किसी पाकिस्तान के इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर को, चाहे वो सिक्योरिटी का है, रेगुलेटरी है, बैंकिंग है, उसको अटैक करता है। तो हाउ टू डील विद इट। यहां इस बात को मैं यही छोड़ता हूं बिकॉज जवाब कोई भी नहीं है। वी कैन रेज क्वेरी फ्रेमवर्क, बट आई ऑल्सो सी सम एडवांटेजेस ऑफ दिस एंटायर इन माई प्रोफेशन, लीगल प्रोफेशन। एंड हाउ डू आई सी दोज एडवांटेजेस। देखिए पाकिस्तान में केसेस की पेंडेंसी देखिए लाखों में है। आप में से हर शख्स किसी न किसी केस का शिकार रहा है, या आपकी फैमिली मेंबर, कोई डिफेंडेंट होगा, कोई प्लेंटिफ होगा, सिविल कोर्ट से लेकर सुप्रीम कोर्ट तक। एवरी मैटर दैट गोज टू कोर्ट वो स्टॉल कर देता है इकोनॉमी की मूवमेंट किसी न किसी फॉर्म में, छोटी फॉर्म में, बड़ी फॉर्म, चाहे वो दुकान का स्टे हो, उस दुकान का बिजनेस रुक जाता है। किसी जमीन का किसी घर पर स्टे ऑर्डर हो, उस जमीन का ट्रांसफर ऑफ टाइटल रुक जाता है। सो हर केस is a stumbling block in the economy of the country. If we can find an artificial intelligence framework which adjudicates most of these cases in an automated fashion, the trust in the system will stand revived. और लॉ में उसका फायदा मुझे ये नजर आता है कि लॉ में तमाम चीजें डॉक्यूमेंटेड ऑलरेडी हैं। स्टैचूज 8,000, 8,500 फेडरल लॉज ऑफ पाकिस्तान, 3,500 प्रोविंशियल लॉज ऑफ पाकिस्तान आर ऑल इन द डाटा ऑफ मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ लॉ। रूल्स आर इन द डाटा, स्टेटरी बॉडीज का डाटा है, केसेस का डाटा है, सुप्रीम कोर्ट का स्टैम्प एक्ट पे क्या व्यू है, सुप्रीम कोर्ट का ट्रांसफर ऑफ प्रॉपर्टी के एक्ट पे क्या व्यू है, सुप्रीम कोर्ट का मैरिज के किसी इंटरप्रिटेशन के लॉ पे क्या इशू, वो सब चीजें डाटा में फेड हैं। बाजुकात ये होता है कि वकला हमारे ही दोस्त या बाज किसी ना किसी बोझ में आदमी कहता है नहीं मैंने छोड़ना नहीं है इसको, मैंने इसके खिलाफ केस करना है, I have to file a case, I will do whatever it takes to take him to so आप वो aggressive mode में वो केस फाइल करते हैं without making an assessment whether you actually have a case or not। दूसरा जो एक और एरिया डेवलप हो रहा है वो ADRC का अल्टरनेटिव डिस्प्यूट रेजोल्यूशन, उसमें जो सुप्रीम कोर्ट is taking a serious attention to this area कि if we can put in the data of the entire case file जो किसी ने फाइल की, आपने, मैंने फाइल की है, और उसको डाटा से प्रोसेस करवा के लाइकलीहुड ऑफ विक्ट्री एंड डिफीट आइडेंटिफाई कर दिया जाए, तो पार्टीज में बी टेम्प्टेड टू नेगोशिएट आउट ऑफ कोर्ट। सो द स्ट्रेस विच इज ऑन द कोर्ट प्रोसेस वो डिक्रीज होने के चांसेस हैं। इसी तरह ऑलरेडी कोर्ट्स में अब वीडियो स्क्रीन्स के थ्रू लॉयर्स आर एड्रेसिंग आर्गुमेंट्स इन हाई कोर्ट्स फ्रॉम कराची वाले वकला इस्लामाबाद हाई कोर्ट में, लाहौर वाले वकला पेशावर हाई कोर्ट में, वो शुरू हो गया है। एक सिविल जज साहब ने बड़ा इनोवेटिव काम किया, कहीं डस्का में वो पोस्टेड थे, उन्होंने AI के को इस्तेमाल करते हुए एक जजमेंट जनरेट की। दैट टू मी इज अ स्टार्टिंग पॉइंट ऑफ द न्यू एरा इन द जुडिशरी। उसमें जाहिर है जजेस और वकला का काम बहुत कम हो जाएगा और उनका रोल ड्रामेटिकली रिड्यूस होगा, बट दैट कॉस्ट हमें उठानी चाहिए बिकॉज लोग आराम पाएंगे, लोग होपफुली इससे सुकून पाएंगे। तो मेरा ख्याल है आई स्टॉप हेयर कि 2 पॉइंट्स हैं। इंटरनेशनल लॉ में इट्स एन अनरेगुलेटेड एरिया और उसके थ्रेट सिक्योरिटी पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से एस्केलेट कर रहे हैं, और दूसरी साइड पर उसका यूज भी है। वो जिस तरह कहा जाता है कि आइदर राइड द टाइगर और बी ईटन बाय इट, इन जुडिशियल सर्कल, इन लीगल थिंग, वी शुड राइड द टाइगर। थैंक यू वेरी मच।
Thank you so much for a very important perspective. And since I look at international security, when you talked about cybersecurity, in 2018, a nuclear posture review was released by the Trump administration. And this was the first time that the administration said that if US is attacked, command and control structure or any critical infrastructure, cybersecurity attempt has happened, it will, though it is a non-kinetic space, US reserves the right to use nuclear weapons against that country. And that opened up a window for countries to be there. And obviously it's a gray zone, you know, there's no law that stops. So there are huge vulnerabilities there. So thank you so much for your perspective. We'll now move to our very, favorite topic, higher education and AI, and it's very close to all of our hearts. And we have Dr. Suhail Naqvi here, who has had a lifetime of experience with higher education. Dr. Naqvi, we would like you to talk to us about, you deal with universities in Pakistan, how equipped are universities in Pakistan with providing the skill set that is required for the job market today? What are some of the AI benefits for higher education, sector overall? We all also want to know, is AI detection possible really with ChatGPT, LLMs? You know, how do we safeguard academic integrity? And how can industry-academia collaboration foster an AI competent workforce? Over to you, sir.
Wow, there's a lot of questions over there. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It's a real pleasure to be here. I think I want to start with a slight description of what AI is, artificial intelligence. सबने नाम सुना हुआ है क्या चीज़? Basically, AI is a pattern recognition mechanism. आप सारे के सारे data को लेके you convert it into just numbers, and then you have matrix multiplications. And to call it intelligence is about as far from the truth as is possible. All you are trying to do is you are trying to minimize a certain error. It's a mathematical function that you're trying to minimize. This new development is because they have gone back to an old technology. Old I say because I studied it in University of Neural Networks, जहाँ के पीछे आप layers लगा देते हैं. But basically all you can think about is कि जी मुख्तलिफ, there are lots and lots of matrix multiplications, and you figure out the weights of those things, and the weights are figured out based on how a certain distance is minimized. अब इसके अंदर आप सवाल पूछेंगे इसके अंदर इंटेलिजेंस किधर गई? And what does it have to do with the topic? And the answer is absolutely nothing. This is simply something trained on a specific amount of data. अब switching languages, ਹੁਣ ਮੈਂ ਪੁੱਛਾਂਗਾ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਚ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਕਿ ਬੁੱਲੇ ਸ਼ਾਹ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਬੁੱਲਿਆ ਕੀ ਜਾਣਾ ਮੈਂ ਕੌਣ? ਅਗਰ ਬੁੱਲੇ ਸ਼ਾਹ ਪੁੱਛੇ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਆਈ ਤੂੰ ਕੌਣ? We would ask the question, okay, now we are stuck over here because this tool is trained entirely on some data sets that exist somewhere in the world, some language, some papers over there, and it's in a different language. So all languages, and this is not just Punjabi or Brahmi or Sindhi or any Persian or anything of this, all languages are left out because every training is done over there. Every question that you're going to ask from Copilot, ChatGPT or anything is going to be answered in the context, cultural, linguistic, religious context of what it is trained on. So now you need to, think about it a little bit. Now, we all use it in the sense that you want to do a quick, yaar iski summary kar do. Chalo ji, 10 pages ka paper डाला उसने, 2 paragraph आपको निकाल के दे दी. इसके मुझे इस तरह करो कि एक प्रेजेंटेशन बना दो उसने 5 प्रेजेंटेशंस में ग्राफिक डाल दो उसने वो डाल दी. इस तरह करो कि अल्फाज निकाल दो and change it all into pictures. It can do that. Make a video. It can do that. all of it has nothing to do with FC College or Lahore or your cultural heritage and who you are. So you need to understand what this tool is. Now, what it can do is there are things that are different and then there are things that are not different. So if you want to create a website using this front end, this back end, these security protocols, and you can actually ask the AI engine and it will create it for you. Now that's a uniform language. The mathematics behind it, the computer science program. So who has to worry? Well, definitely computer science programmers have to worry because they're going to be the first ones. They are getting themselves out of this low level work. But if you're talking about a design of something that I want to have this shop that is going to be talking about the architecture of Behra and the art, the cult, everything aspect of it, that's where the human part is going to come in until we have figured out कि हम AI को अपनी languages में डाल के किस तरह से train करें. But there is a bigger issue at play here for Pakistan. We need to be very, very worried about it. It's not about AI. We have basically outsourced our future to another culture and another language. All of us. If I was to do a survey over here, I may be the last one left here, जिसने FSC की थी, but it's all A levels. Okay? And all of your questioning and all of your everything and all the future and all the kids that are being found, उनको तो 4 जुमले उर्दू के नहीं लिखने आते, my kids included in all of this. So we have already taken all of these steps, and we need to be concerned क्योंकि AI ने इसको turbo करना है सारी चीज को. So डॉक्टर साहब ने बात की taking malware and you get artificial engines now working at it. We have to be extremely careful. To your question about can you recognize it, the answer is no, because it's getting better and better and better, and so it is going to be impossible. What you will recognize is कि मतलब ये जो है सारा दिन तो क्लास में सोता रहता है, मतलब ठीक है, इसने ये एक चीज कैसे लिखी है, वो तो 10 सेकंड के अंदर आपने उसकी शक्ल देखनी है, and then there will be 2 other questions that you will add to it, and then दूध और पानी इस तरफ अलग अलग होगा. So that is the way we are going to figure these things out. But in the technological domains, in biology, in physics, in chemistry, in new materials, in whatever, phenomenal possibilities. Mr. Sufi talked about law, huge. Medicine, phenomenal possibility. Developing country, please, somebody, do that. The country could also be making a lot of money. FBR sits on an enormous amount of data. You mix that up with Nadra, you've got even more data. How the heck is it possible कि एक आदमी कह रहा है मेरा जो 2.5 करोड़ का टेलीफोन बिल आया है पर टैक्स मेरा जो है ना वो 2.5 रुपए का. Now if you have 37 million of these to figure out, then you get the computers to sort this out. All of this can be done. But अगर पीछे ऊपर बंदा बैठा होने के नहीं करना ही नहीं तो फिर then there is no ways around that aspects of it. So in higher education, it is a subject specific issue. We have to understand the roots of how AI engines are trained, where they are coming from, and what the applications are. Phenomenal possibilities of accelerating things, but then we must understand the limitations also, and we must also know that every single kid out there with a smartphone is already using all artificial intelligence tools that could possibly be there. So you as the teacher have now the task of 2 steps ahead of them, and that is not going to be too difficult. You can easily design the questions that are going to be probing, that are going to be looking at issues and seeing whether they have actually gone ahead and done the research. But I see a huge amount of complacency all over the world that is happening. हम बैठे हैं, हम किसी चीज पे research करना है. Oh, by the way, we are just going to ignore everything that that country has to say about itself, because उसकी language के ऊपर हम trained ही नहीं हैं. So Mongolia की पहले बात हो रही थी, तो Mongolian language की जितने असासे हैं और जितनी पुरानी उसकी सकाफत है और जितनी हिस्ट्री है और सब, everything is gone. We're just going to get a consultant's view of how to do something like that, and that's exactly the trap we are falling into repeatedly. Most recently, when the Prime Minister invited somebody from abroad to do an economic paper for Pakistan, you read that economic paper and you say, yaar, matlab, what the heck? Did you just sit there and ask your AI engine to do that kind of thing? Have you ever been in Pakistan and looked at what the reality is over here? So, the entire purpose of elevating and supporting higher education in the country was so that it would take ownership of that. And this mental slavery that we have, that somebody else is going to come and solve our problem, no, Pakistani ko Pakistani kaatega, ye yaad rakhein. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I wanted you to take a minute and talk about the skill set we need to, equip the young generation with. What about prompt engineering? If LLMs have to be the future, then do you think that is one skill set that they need to know in order to excel? Give the right prompt for the right productivity output.
I believe that the roots of prompt engineering all lie in critical thinking, because you are trying to get a response, but for that you have to, as I said, understand the limitation of what that training was from, what was it based upon, and what is it that you're trying to achieve. I was working on a problem the other day, and I was, probing it and asking it questions, and then asking it the second questions, then I would go into Google and so it's like a dopamine hit. You just get it and it gives you a beautiful answer, like this, and you could think, oh, okay, kaam ho gaya. That is where the problem lies. You have to go into it. You have, and actually start using it to your advantage rather than, just this superficial thing that could be there.
Absolutely. I think critical thinking is what universities need to invest in and teach their students. And also for every term paper, please have a 10 marks Viva added to it. And then, he was talking about sifting them, that would be easier. So thank you so much. A huge round of applause for our panelists, please. So we will now open the floor for questions. Please articulate your thoughts and be concise because we are short on time and we want all the panelists to engage with you. Identify yourself and the speaker you are addressing the question to. Can somebody please give the mic at the back? Is there an extra mic? No mic. Yeah.
वैसे भी पूछ सकते हैं, आवाज आ जाएगी।
Please identify yourself and the speaker as well. जिनसे question पूछना है।
My name is Mustafa and I am from School of Life Sciences. And before you guys started talking about the difficult things, I just want to ask a very simple and basic question that, but first I need to tell you that I am a very big advocate of adopting and preparing for the AI. So how you guys can encourage an artist to keep painting and the poet and a writer to keep writing in the future? Since what I understood is being human is all about incompleteness. It's all about the imperfection. So, if we are like going in the same way, like for in a couple of decades, I think the human beings might be rare in the future.
I think it's a profound question. Dr. Naqvi, would you like to answer this?
I think I will rely on the Ashraful Makhlukat title of the human being and say, don't worry about it. The competition is intense. But I mean, if we're talking about Pakistan और उसने write करना है, तो अगर उसने लोगों से बात करनी है तो वो तो उर्दू में होगी, और फिर अगर उसको concise करना है तो वो शेर होगा. तो अभी I have seen examples of Urdu poetry by AI. It's getting there, लेकिन अभी बहुत there are many opportunities that are available. Actually, I have absolutely no idea what the future would be holding. Just a firm belief that the human always is going to be aware.
Ji Sufi sir, please. Ji,
Just like to add one point to that. So if this all intellectual works are going to stop, so ultimately AI quality is going to get affected, because AI have to understand those patterns which have been somewhere, some down the lane was conceptualized, some poetry was written. So ये possible नहीं है. मैं अगर आज इसको मैं extrapolate करूँ stand को, so what is going to get happen, that intellectual works is going to get stopped, the AI quality is going to get affected. So ultimately उसने उन्हीं patterns को recognize करके कुछ चीज produce करनी है. So उसकी precisions cannot be there as he mentioned. तो अशरफुल मखलूकात आप ही हैं. वो सोच नहीं रहा, मतलब he is not predicting something. वो सिर्फ जो already patterns हैं उनको understand करके project कर रहा है. That's it. So if intellectual work is going to, the funnel stop हो जाएगा. If knowledge gets stopped, there is no output can get produced. So ये जो already produced है उसी के ऊपर वो खेलते रहेंगे 1-2 साल बस. That's it. So that is going to get there.
मेरा ख्याल ये बहुत बड़ा चैलेंज है फॉर अ टीचर ऑफ इंग्लिश लिटरेचर, हिस्ट्री, पोइट्री, उर्दू लिटरेचर टू परसुएट द क्लास कि कंटिन्यू ऑन द कोर्स ऑफ क्रिएटिविटी. आप तो हैं, लेकिन यहाँ और बहुत सारे टीचर्स हैं ना, बिकॉज ये सवाल बायोलॉजी के अलावा बाकी डिसिप्लिन से भी रेज हो रहा है कि व्हाट इज द इंसेंटिव क्यों है कि मैं पोइट्री लिखूं या बुल्ले शाह को पढूं या शेक्सपियर को पढूं या मैं किसी और लिटरेचर को देखूं जब वो ऑटो जनरेट हो सकता है. तो मेरा ख्याल है आगे चलकर एक क्लासिफिकेशन डेवलप होना शुरू हो जाएगी. लोग कहेंगे अहमद बिलाल सूफी पोइट्री ऑर्गेनिक साइंड, चैट जीबीटी जनरेटेड पोइट्री. सो बिल्कुल जिस तरह आजकल ऑर्गेनिक फूड की अपनी इफादियत आइडेंटिफाई होती है, इसी तरह आगे बढ़ेंगे.
Thank you so much. Ji. After question and then come to you. Ji, please.
I am Abdul Ghani from Religious Studies Department, and I know that what to say to the people while using AI in religious studies. I can say that you have more time to now contemplate and go for meditation and just walk along the bank of a river. But we are facing challenges in education, and we have learned from Dr. Naqvi and others that it can affect our teaching style, the way we design courses, the way we actually create assignments. So can you please help us that what we need to do differently now, what we have been doing traditionally in education, in imparting critical thinking, in actually identifying student learning goals. So what are the things we need to reset, or we need to change our paradigm in education, that this is cognitive domain and it will not be working anymore in the same way we have been doing. So Dr. Naqvi, over to you, please.
Well, it's very simple. You ask ChatGPT. Because this is something that the people over the ages have spent a lot of time. This is not a new problem. How are you going to create critical thinking? How are you going to create more interesting lectures? How are you going to engage? And so this is a constant journey, and I am sure that there would be a lot of tools that would be available. To do excellent teaching, you have to excite a passion, and you have to get the people engaged, and you have to connect with them. So कोई ऐसी चीज पकड़नी है, चाहे आप कहें कि जी okay Instagram की पोस्ट बना दें, regardless of whether you're talking about biology or physics over here. You have to have that mechanism of connecting with them and to create something. That is what you are asking them to. And then the exercises would come. And again, going back to the enormous amount of body of literature, here you will have to, of course, use prompt engineering कि जी South Asian student, this kind of a context, ये मैं पढ़ाना चाह रहा हूँ, philosophy का course है, उसके अंदर हम ये objective करना चाह रही हैं, what is the body of literature? And that is where the whole, excitement comes out, that there is such a wealth of information that will be on your fingertips tips instantly. But it will boil down to the old fashion. Did you create that spark? That's what it is all about.
Just in addition to what Dr. Naqvi said, when you're standing in a classroom, your experiences, your life experiences, there's no substitute for that. No AI model can bring that spark that he's talked about. So when you are standing, you need to connect with the student. You can use whatever instruments, tools out there, but you as a person are connecting with another human being. And so far, there's no substitute for that. So bring that to the classroom.
One final comment. One way out could be that counter AI through AI. So you can, the academia in Pakistan can develop some kind of tool or technique that can detect if the assignment is generated through AI, through ChatGPT. There are some initiatives in the US from Stanford, from other universities, that can detect if this specific document of this specific video has been generated through ChatGPT or these kind of things. So European Union, even I know they have developed some kind of solutions for all the European countries here, where some of their user can upload their video and it can detect that it is a fake or it is an actual video, right? Or it has been generated through AI. So some of the initiative at national level, maybe some consortium of the universities, some best minds, researchers you are sitting here, can develop some kind of mechanism, some kind of tool for the education sector in Pakistan that can detect if this specific assignment, if this specific document has been generated through AI, and what is the percentage of the organic part into this. So this could be done even also.
Although there are counters, you can humanize AI content and try doing this. Please, ChatGPT gives you a content, tell it to humanize it, and it will dumb it down to make you feel how dumb in its thought processes human content should be. And you read it and you say, no, this can't be, so better stick to AI answers. But there is a counter to every, effort out there. Please, sir.
I'm Fareed Malik from the School of Business. Dr. Fawad used the term unprepared. I met Dr. Naqvi in the decade of 80s when he was teaching at Albuquerque, New Mexico. At that time, we were building a silicon semiconductor wafer fab for Intel in Albuquerque. Then I came to Pakistan, and we tried to develop semiconductors in Pakistan. But now I'm working on developing coal. So we moved down from semiconductors, from silicon to coal. So my question is, what are we prepared for? That is my question.
Dr. Fawad, would you like to please join us? You have been very patient with us.
Interesting question. It goes back to really education. Our priorities related to education are totally skewed. And it starts, and it's not just university education, it is primary education, secondary education. And, each wave that we miss, so if we talk about silicon, the cost of building a fab in the 80s was way lower than, building a fab now. And it is now prohibitively expensive for Pakistan. So what we really need to do is to have a forward-looking policy, catch on to the next wave, and AI is the wave. Or one of the waves, and really prepare for it. And like I said, it's a lot of mathematics, it's a lot of statistics, it is economics, it is engineering, and these subjects properly taught will prepare us for, for any new field, the barriers to entry are low, but as the field matures, the barriers to entry start, becoming prohibitive. So we have to really focus on building an educated workforce. Otherwise, we will be reduced to doing or not doing manual work or low-cost work, which is threatened by AI. Call centers are touted as, as they're part of the IT industry. There are many call centers operating in the country, and they're all threatened because AI, voice bots will replace the call center agents. So we have to focus on education, and that is our only way forward.
All right, thank you. G.
So I have a question.
Yes, please.
Here. So, excuse me. So I raised my hand when we were having
Sure,
a debate
please.
on the first question. So
Please, go
I'll,
ahead.
sorry for taking you back to the first question. Dr. Naqvi, I agree with you when you say that it is subject related also, because I teach literature, and in my class, Digital Approaches to Literature, there was this one activity where I asked the students to draw a comparison between AI generated poetry and human generated poetry, human poetry. And the kind of debates that this comparison actually led to involved a detailed discussion on intuition and ingenuity. Because just like you said, a computer is formulaic in nature. It will prove the formula. 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. But literature doesn't work that way, So it needs intuition that comes from the human mind. So literature in specific and humanities in general, we deal with human experiences. So we deal with humanistic production. So the human world that we deal with, somehow it is considered to be a diametrical opposite to the digital world. I am not saying that we cannot seek help from the digital tools. There are many digital tools that we can make use of. But then there's a difference between what can be proved and what is true. You see? So maybe a computer or a formula in maths, it may help you prove something. It is provable, but maybe it's not true. So, no, it was a comment on the first question that was there. So, again, do you think that, intuition can be replaced with ingenuity? And you see, because one deals with the mechanics and the other deals with mind. Thank you.
I think here we have to be also thinking about the human brain, and we don't quite understand how we recall, how we store memory, how the connections are made. And then we go to the biological basis where we have neurons and communications and synapses. And then they say, well, neural networks are basically trying to model that. You don't understand the human brain, you don't understand this. So you say, there is a billions or billions and billions of these. So, then the silicon is becoming faster and faster, and you're trying to replicate it, and you're adding billions and billions and billions. So, ingenuity, what is its source? We don't understand quite of it. Well, but can we train something to generate that? And that is where I think we'll just have to see where the technology is going to take us, but it's certainly very, very interesting.
So can I just make a comment about intuition? So some of the latest experiments that have been done with AI was one experiment done with an unmanned helicopter. And it was given certain tasks to accomplish. But mid-journey, its task was to choose a path and be intuitive. And that wasn't already fed in, right? And it surprised the scientists who were actually experimenting that AI model became intuitive and then used its own pathway, which was already not predetermined. So you never know that in future, we might end up there. Ma'am, your question, please. Yes.
All right. So the question is, how can AI be used to scale up healthcare services in remote regions with limited medical professions? I'm asking this question because my area of interest is healthcare communication, and I've done my PhD in linguistics. That's the reason I'm asking this question. Thank you so much.
Having said that, I'll come to remote areas. So, talking about generically about the healthcare sector. So, AI is making huge strides, to be very honest. One of the project I'm in discussion with one of our supply chain consulting lead from the EMEA region last week. So, one of the recent win which they had is about leveraging the EWISE AI models to study the biological information to identify the promising candidates for the clinical trials. So it is what at the end of the day, the model, the logic was there, the algorithm were designed by the relevant scientists, but the achievement was the time to market the product. It got very much expedited because now AI models are analyzing information and the interesting candidates for the clinical trials came out very expeditedly and ultimately for the next phase of the activity. Having said that, for the remote areas, we have been there are many startups working in the Pakistan, Sehat Kahani and all the activities. So I did an activity for the IFC for the market study assessment in the health sector domain. So there are many startups working in this sphere. And right now, because as earlier mentioned, from the legal perspective for the medicine, there's all documentation is there, all laws are there, all the practices are there for which information, for which what is the right prescription for that. So having access to the huge vast amount of data and then the diagnostics and leveraging the huge sort of technological advices available remotely. The pictures are there, they can scan, and leveraging those technologies, they can diagnose. So first of all, to access, to diagnose, to identify the right root cause of the health activity, and then the prescriptions. So if we see all the AI knowledge which we developed so far, so from the diagnostics, we can easily identify because of the huge information available, and then for the prescription, there is vast amount of data available in the data sets, what is the right prescription for the relevant. So being remotely connected, diagnostic and prescription. So there is a lot of strides that they're going there. There is a research paper as well. So I'll share with there too as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I got a question to the leaders at the end.
I just wanted to add a few comments to the
Dr.
healthcare. So, currently, there are systems that are able to foretell onset of Alzheimer's 10 years in advance. There are, cancer detection through image analysis. AI systems perform way better than other, normal doctors. And it's been done, proven time and again that AI systems perform way better than doctors. And going as far back as the 1970s, where there was this system called Mycene, which performed better than 70% of all doctors. So for remote areas, it's just the access to imagery. Once the imagery is available or the symptoms are available with the AI system, very quickly the diagnosis and the treatment plan can be offered to the patients. Now, the delivery at the remote sites, that may be an issue, availability of medicine or such things. But the capability of health AI is amazing. And why isn't it being popularized? Why isn't it used more? It goes back to the legal issues. If there is a wrong diagnosis, who is going to be liable the hospital, the doctor, the system, the programmer. So it's a murky area, but I think we're all going to struggle through it and arrive at
Thank you. Thank you so
interesting
much.
conclusions.
So, in the interest of time, because we are about to close the session,
just
we
one
will.
question.
Yes, I am coming to you. We will collect the questions and then I will pose them to the panelists. So please go ahead.
So my question is to the legal experts, sir, at the end. How familiar
Mr.
you are,
Sufi.
Sir Sufi, how familiar you are with the fact that some judges could be using generative AI, giving it all the information and all the data about the case and all the evidences, and then generating those legal verdicts, and how fair and rational could be those judgments?
Just hold on to your thoughts. Ji, please.
So, I'm Dr. Saima Majid from Psychology Department. I have a question for Dr. Naqvi because I've just recently completed a study, role of generative AI in academia, especially the teacher's perspective. And most of or almost all of my participants, they are talking about there is a need of a well-versed, well-designed policy for both teachers and students for use of generative AI in academia. So I have a question where the Higher Education Commission is thinking about that to establish a policy for universities, for higher education, for both teachers and students in order to reduce that concept of plagiarism, cheating, and enhance ethical and responsible use of generative AI. Thank
Good
you.
question. You know that ChatGPT can now be footnoted? You can give credit to ChatGPT in your research legally.
Yes, but some of international journals, they are now saying that don't use AI as a second author, but yes, you can tell, so there are so much policies internationally. But I'm talking about that whether we are just thinking about to making some policies for that or not.
Sure. G.
I'm Dr. Imran from CAM-SLS. I want to ask that at least at this moment, we are thinking that data is overowned and it would be beneficial to us. And generative AIs are generating new data. So what would be the dangers then when most of the data is generated by the AI rather than the humans?
Dr. Heather, your question. We end the question and answer session here. All right. Please go ahead. We can get to that. Ji, absolutely last comment. अपने पीछे देखो, please.
Also, you need to.
We have a lot of population seeking employment. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll end the session here. Over to you, Dr. Sufi sir.
Thank you very much. Basically, जो हमारा legal profession है, उसमें इसका इस्तेमाल मेरा ख्याल है सबसे
उन्होंने जब उन्होंने वो कर
और since most of the data issues are tied up in recognized documents, power of attorney, agreement to sell, sales of goods, purchase orders, invoices, and whatever. If all these documentation is well recognized by data, so therefore its assessment, the assessment of its content, if this version or that version of the plaintiff or the defendant should win or which would be better, is much more dependable. So I think right now some judges may not be using it right now, but they may be undertaking initial preliminary scanning of the cases that may be coming to them. But I see that future में जो chief justices आ रहे हैं Supreme Court के, they are more inclined towards making use of it. So my sense is we may see at a registrar, high court registrar, session court level पर एक AI generated
draft judgment making available to parties कि अब आप लोग देख लें आपने out of court settle करना है या इसको आगे लेके जाना.
Thank you, Dr.
As far as policies, etc., as a matter of principle, I'm opposed to all of that. I don't want a teacher to be dictated by something like that. I think AI has disrupted, and the challenge now is for the teacher to work in this environment and to create something that is interesting, engaging, and achieving the objectives that you want. As far as the challenges of plagiarism, etc., are concerned, I feel that that has to be tackled not in this cop policeman. It has to be tackled by going deeper into that guy. What are you doing? And you can have experiments like say, okay, fine. Is waqt you will have an examination, and there will be no proctoring about it. Try it. Fawad is there in the early days of GIK. That was what was done, and there was no cheating. I know that at the University of New Mexico, I never sat through exams. I gave an exam, चला गया अपना काम कर किया, घंटे बाद वापस आया, papers इकट्ठे किए. We've also done experiments where we have said, okay, now अपने paper खुद grade कर दो. And the result was that people are harder on themselves. So I think it's a question that has to be taken at many levels above trying to go in, because what's the point of an education that produces a kid that is going to plagiarize? We don't want to release these people in society.
So, being the cybersecurity student, I have the different view of this AI models and data sharing and privacy. As Mr. Sufi had mentioned, the use of LLM models and generative AI for the court cases, I see this is a kind of privacy and security threat to our data that we have in Pakistan, for example. If you do not implement for example, the mechanisms of federated learning where your model is trained on your local data and the data is not shared with the international all stakeholders, it is only trained and only the model is shared, model gradient is only shared with that specific, then it's fine. But unfortunately, we do not have these kind of mechanisms. So you have to give your data to the AI without encrypting it, right? There are homomorphic encryption mechanisms available where you encrypt your data and the model is learned on the encrypted data without decrypting it, without revealing your information. It is anonymized actually. You do not know whose data is this, right? So in this context, if this mechanism is not present and you have not deployed locally in your country, in your organization, where your data is being processed within your premises, this is a threat to your data that could be used by different various malicious purposes by different kind of organizations. So the federated learning is a kind of mechanism that you actually do all the learning of your models with your local data and the data is not being shared, right? The homomorphic encryption and these kind of mechanisms. So following these strict privacy laws, because when this comes out, you give all of your data and these models actually learn from your actual data being transferred to them is a kind of security threat and a kind of national threat that could pose many challenges in near future. And we have seen in various economies around the world in different countries where the actual e-revolution and these kind of things has been actually erupted by sharing these kind of information.
I just wanted to add one point regarding data. If the data that is on which the models are trained is biased, then the AI will actually reinforce those biases. So we have to be very cognizant of the fact that डेटा में अगर बायसेस हैं तो वो क्या हैं? So, it can reinforce discrimination, inequality, and so forth. So this is one of the dangers of data being used without that sort of control.
And discussions. All you need to understand about this, I'm not going to sum up because it was a wide-ranging conversation, that the challenges we have in Pakistan are unique to our own economic, social, and political structures. And we as educators, academics, practitioners need to understand that special context and have the self-accountability when we are using AI or training the next gen on AI. So with this, a huge round of applause for our panelists, please, and the organizers. Thank you so much.
So, one of you, and I must say, we are very indebted to you for your presence here. I know, Suhail, you are wanting to run away. So is Heather. He has to go back to Islamabad. I know he has a meeting too. Just one thing that came out of your comments, and Suhail, you are very, I wish we lived in that world that you think of. Because the actual human nature, I have noticed on the average, will not function at that level of maturity that you demand, this demands. And I have noticed, unfortunately, that in our country, we have not allowed our nation to mature here, or anywhere. So I do not know whose flaw is it, no finger pointing, but till we acquire a stage where we are embedded with the values that we hold dear, and I don't see that much around us. Not much is going to change. And how to inculcate that maturity, those values, is $1 million question that we're trying to solve. And perhaps we'll find an answer and be where you want us to be, to a world. But I must say one thing is clear. We need lawyers, we need practitioners, we need cybersecurity, we need education, we need Fawad, people like him in the practical world to come together now with governments to plan how we want to do with this. And this panel makes it amply clear. We're so thankful to each one of you.